Hey everyone, welcome to our Z to B session. This month will be about Asian American and Pacific Islander solidarity. We will start with introduction of the panelists, and to begin with, we'll do an icebreaker, and the icebreaker question will be, what animal do you identify with the most and why? And I could go first, and then I want you guys to call on the next person as well after you're done answering the question. And for me, I would say favorite animal is a bear because bears are really, they're really chill, they're really relaxed. Don't mess with them, they won't mess with you, but they can hold their own ground. So yeah. And then the next person I'll call on is Alex.
Everybody, I'm Alex. Should I say what generation I'm supposed to be?
Oh yeah, and could
Okay.
everyone say name, age, and what ethnicity you are as well?
Okay. Yeah, so I'm Alex. I am part of the, I guess, millennial um, generation, although I'm right on the cusp of Gen Z, I guess. I'm Vietnamese American, the son of two refugees, and let's see. Animal I identify the most with is probably an otter, because I spent a lot of time in water growing up. And yeah, I will call on Jason.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jason Tremblay. I'm not sure what generation I fall in. I'm 37, so if anyone knows, please tell me. My ethnicity is I'm biracial and specifically Pacific Islander. My mother is from the island of Palau in the South Pacific, and I would say an animal. I kind of like to say I'm a parrot because I've got a lot of energy and I like to talk a lot. So there you go. I will turn it over to Christine.
Thank you, Jason. Christine Chen Ryan. Well, in feng shui, I'm a sheep. So I'll go with that, even though my personality is not a sheep. um, and I am ethnically Chinese, first 1.5 or 1.75, I'm born out, first generation born outside of China. And next one is Anata. Is that how pronounced?
Yeah, that was spot on, actually. My name is Nada. I use she, her pronouns. I am Vietnamese American. I am the daughter of two Vietnamese refugees. Actually, Alex is my cousin. My spirit animal, I'm going to say my dog Leo because he's very lazy and he just hands all day long. Let's go with Shibangi.
Okay, hi, my name's Shibangi. I'm currently 16. I identify as Indian American. I'm a first generation immigrant, so are both of my parents. And an animal I identify with, probably pandas. They just sit around and do nothing and eat bamboo all day. And right now, that's kind of what I want to do. So that's what I identify with right now. And I'll call on Nadia.
I also work with the Z2B team. My name's Nadia. I'm a Gen Z. My ethnicity is I'm like half Russian, half Ukrainian, and there's also some Polish blood in there. So I'm not sure the percentage is, but somewhere there. I guess the animals I mostly identify with are dolphins and wolves. It's always been two. I could never choose. I guess the dolphins is like my calmer side, like I love to swim. I'm lucky enough to live next to the ocean, so I swim every day. I just swim next to the fish. So I guess that's the dolphin. And the wolf is just my perseverance, the hard work that I put in almost everywhere. I try to put it everywhere. So nice to have you guys here.
And then could you call on, I think Bing is the last person actually.
Okay. Yep.
I'm Bing, and I'm 69, and I'm a Chinese American, native Oregonian, and my favorite animals are birds. I'm a bird watcher, and kind of expensive hobby. But I like crows and ravens because they're pretty smart and sassy.
Mm-hmm. I thank you all for your answers. That was actually pretty interesting hearing all your guys' favorite animals. I didn't hear a lot of people answer the question like that. But yeah, to start off, I just want to say like today again the topic is about Asian American and Pacific Islander solidarity. And I guess like just to emphasize like Z2B is like a place to talk about your beliefs and your opinions openly. It's not somewhere that you guys should feel afraid to say what you're truly thinking. But at the same time, please be respectful of other people speaking. If you feel like you're speaking a long time, hand it over to somebody else. Share the time. There's a limited amount of time. And also just encourage each other to speak, call on each other, help each other out with answers. Don't be afraid. You could keep your microphone off mute as well if you feel comfortable with that. And yeah, let's just share ideas and have a good conversation. Nadia, what do you have anything to add?
No, honestly, you said everything
Okay.
perfectly.
Sound
Just like this exchange of ideas. Don't feel afraid to just jump in if you feel like you have something to say, but also like just don't interrupt people, But no one's gonna do this here, so we're all good.
really good, yeah. So the first question is, how has your relationship with this country changed over the course of your life? And this is open to anybody to answer.
I can start. I came here when I was 10 years old, and the U.S. was the leader and the best country in the world, for everything. Um, so I attended public school, and it was one of the best, and so I felt really good. I I am or was, well, not so much lately, but proud to be an American. We really did. My parents brought us all over here for, the opportunities, like all immigrants, right? Opportunities in education. They were very frugal, but when it came to education, the sky was the limit. But, it's all immigrants are very frugal, right? When you, especially when you had less. I came with a very optimistic, loved the country, became a citizen, grew up really as American more than an Asian, and grew up in a Jewish neighborhood, which is now strictly Asian.
Mhm.
So I grew up in Flushing, Queens, New York City, before Flushing became the second Chinatown and Korean town. So I really had some excellent experiences. I love New York City. Um, so, but, I don't know if we need to talk about now, but I do not really, obviously I'm unhappy, and we can talk more about how I feel about it now.
Mhm.
I can. Sorry. We work together.
I can. Quick, if you would like to quickly introduce yourself, we're just starting on the first question, which is how has your relationship with the country changed? But yeah, if you would like to give your name, age, and I guess favorite animal that you identify with the most.
Yeah. Hi, everyone, and my apology for running a little bit late on committee hearing. My name is Kian. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm currently working as a legislator. As a chief of staff for Senator Casey Jammer. Very nice to meet you all. And the animal, that's first thing that came to my mind is dog. I was so scared of it when I was young because I got bitten by the dogs like 5 or 6 times when I was a child. And when I went to the US, I become loving with dogs. So
Hey,
very
that's nice.
love-hate relationship with them.
So yeah, sorry. So Christine, would you like to continue how you feel about the country now, or would you like to hear from other people?
Well, I'd like to hear from other people, but I've been actively involved in press releases and speaking against, and webinars against, the anti-APIA hate crimes. So obviously, I do feel strongly about that we've been scapegoat. I've always been trying, as my personality, to try to break the silent model minority myth. And I think the API community is on board on that now with experiencing this. But when I tried to do it in the past, of course, with, I wasn't the stereotype quiet, so it wasn't received very well. But now it's like, you know, everybody's saying, "Oh, we want your strong voice. We want your strong voice." You know, so. But anyway, so that's. I'll give other people a chance to say, but I did want to say that in there. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Christine. Would anyone like to respond to what Christine just said?
Okay.
Oh, did you want to go, or it was by accident?
Yeah, I did, but I thought Bing wanted to say something first because he unmuted himself, right? Or am I saying that wrong?
Yeah, I can add, kind of add to the life experiences because my father was in this country in the 20s and 30s, and he only had a 7th grade education. And then after end of the Second World War, the family went back to China. At that time, a lot of the elders, if they could, were going to go back to Low Country and live out the rest of their lives. And then when the communists took over China, my father had married there, and he knew enough about politics and the communists that they had to leave. So it took my mother out and recommended that my mother's father family leave too because they were landowners, and he knew that landowners, because the communists took over all the properties, that they were actually the enemy of the people, and he ended up being executed. And so came to this country. We're farmers, and we're the only Chinese family in the Dallas area. So it was just growing up in a completely white community. And when I went to the 1st grade, I didn't speak a word of English, but I had a great 1st grade teacher, and I think she's probably I credit her for my success throughout the rest of my life, because I was embraced and did well. My parents have always said that they did not have the opportunity for education, so they wanted us to work hard and go to school, go to college. I was first to graduate from college, and discrimination was much more undertones at that time. Before the dams were built in the Columbia River, there was large populations of Chinese working fish canneries, and they also worked on the railroad. But once all that was done, there was a lot of discrimination. They didn't need the workers anymore, and a lot of them left to bigger cities. We were a farming family, so they wanted good food, vegetables, so that's how that went. And then after college, when I started working, I didn't really get involved with much of anything except for work until my union invited me to participate, because when I worked at OHSU, we were a state institution, and the legislators and the union, leadership didn't know what my job was all about. So they said, you can advocate for yourself and talk to our legislators about the work you do.
About what?
About the work I do, and how I felt like we were underpaid for the skills we had. And so that's kind of how I got started in union work and politics. And a lot of times, when I first got started in Sonoma County Democrats, I also was a Republican one time, and then when I looked at the values, so I aligned more with the Democrats, so I joined the Democratic Party. And initially, when I was in Sonoma County Democrats, there was very few minorities, people of color that were participating. And sometimes it's still a struggle now, in certain committees, you don't see too many minorities. And I also got involved with my community. We have neighborhood associations, so I joined a neighborhood association and got active in that. And then there's groups like near Mount Tabor Parks, and so I joined that group and became a board member. And I also volunteered for some of the refuges. But fortunately, a lot of these organizations, they don't look at color so much. They look at people going up, step up and do the work and volunteer. It's not always that way everywhere else, because for a long time I always look at like white privilege. They don't want minorities to take their jobs. They think they're entitled to having their jobs, and so it's a breakthrough.
So it's a what?
It's a breakthrough to get into those mindsets that everyone has opportunity. If you don't give people opportunity, you don't know what their skills are. And I think this the COVID problem is kind of a highlight, and I'm glad the news media has pointed this out. And the one of the developers of the Moderna vaccine is, Asian and mixed race, and also, if she wasn't given the opportunity, we may, they may not have a vaccine.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing your life experience. I really appreciated that. And would anyone like to respond to what being said, or answer the question how your relationship with America is right now? Yeah, go ahead, Shabana.
Yeah, so I think my relationship with America has been one of developing dislike, right? As a third grader, I didn't really understand my the role that me being an Indian had in my identity and my sense of self. But then slowly, as I'm looking at all these elections, looking into politics and representation, and really sitting down and thinking, right, I realized that it is a big part of maybe not my identity. Maybe I don't see myself as more Indian than American, but if I'm walking down the street or if someone hears my name, then obviously going to be, she's not white American, basically. But I think that combined with everything that's happened over the past 4 to 6 years has just been eye-opening, right? So I never really held much pride. Obviously, I was thankful for the opportunities that it gave me, but my parents did come here for opportunities and education, but it was never really from a standpoint of America or nothing, right? Because a lot of thing a thing that the Indian community at least shares is that we still have pride in the country that we came from, because it's still a very new immigrant group, right? At least in areas like California and Oregon and Texas, we're still it's only been maybe 20, 25 years of us being here. So we still hold a lot of pride in being Indian or being from the regional area within India that we're from. So I think my thoughts about America has always clashed with what do I identify as more, what do I hold more pride in? And slowly and surely it's becoming more of how can I change this so that it can become something I'm proud of, instead of I'm proud of what it is right now.
That was actually a really good response. Does anyone have anything to add on what Shivangi said, or reply to what Christine and Bing were saying? It's okay if not, we could just move on to the next question. So I'll just give you guys a couple seconds to decide if you want to step in. Okay, well, thank you for everyone who answered. I really learned a lot from those answers. So the next question is, are you more or less hopeful now than when you first immigrated, or I guess for the newer generation when you, I guess, compared to when you were a kid or teenager? Um, Alex, do you want to answer first, and then the floor is open for everyone?
Yeah, sure. Um, Am I more hopeful? I'm a pretty cynical person. I think that's only gotten worse. So a little background. You know, I went to undergrad at UC Irvine and discovered ethnic studies and particularly Asian American studies, and that really radicalized sort of my way of thinking. Right, it's a very sort of the field of ethnic studies itself relies a lot on like postmodern theory and sort of these like more leftist ideals, right? And we can get into why that is, but you know, reading about the history of the treatment of Asian Americans in this country and all, you know, sort of quote unquote minority groups in this country would, I think, leave a lot of people very cynical, and myself included. I think I've gotten more and more cynical as time goes on. The last 4 years, there are a lot of things that surprised me, but nothing, I think, made me more surprised than the outcome of the election, actually. And I think there are moments where I can point to that I was hopeful, right? But I think like
with the outcome being
yeah.
with the outcome being Biden being president, or the
Oh yeah.
Democrat presidential election?
No. The outcome being Biden as president, right? Like I think I wouldn't say I'm a scholar of history, but I've done my fair share of reading about it, right? And I think there's another side of me that is a social science researcher, right? So I got my education in public health, but I do a lot of thinking about probabilities, right? And if you read all the probability stuff, like, yes, it was good, but there's always that sort of X factor. And after 2016, I didn't know what to believe anymore. And so I think there are moments that give me hope, but the sort of long arc of history makes me less hopeful than I think I should be.
That's actually that's a good. I mean, would you like to go in depth about what you're not feeling hopeful about?
I think this sort of movement that people have been doing for a while, but I think that's gotten national attention more recently about sort of dismantling white supremacy, right? Which is something that is really important. And I think we can have a larger conversation about that, right? But at the same time is really difficult to do. And really, I've been thinking a lot about the concept of dreaming and having sort of this like creative outlet and how that's somewhat a privilege, right? Like if you're oppressed and you're going through sort of your day-to-day functions, do you even have time to sit and ponder, right? Do you have time to sort of dream? But at the same time, that sort of existence almost leaves you no other room but to dream, right? And to consider the alternate possibilities, right? So it's a sort of double-edged sword in that sense. And so I think, sorry, I lost my train of thought, but I think sort of white supremacy and the dismantlement of it doesn't make me hopeful, and that there's sort of, this is reductionist, but there's sort of two types of people, right? There are people who want incremental change, and there are people who want wholesale change, all or nothing, right? And I guess it depends on what day you ask me, but for the most part, I'm a wholesale change type of person, and the little incremental changes like make me hopeful, but not as hopeful as maybe it might make other people.
That was okay. Thank you. That was actually a really comprehensive answer. I really, really appreciated the answer. It resonated a lot with me. Would anyone like to reply to what Alex said? Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I think Alex's frame like hit home for me. Like I'm very hopeful, but I definitely have my cynical moments. Like so for me, like my mother immigrated from the islands in the 70s. Her home was, clay with a metal roof. And she was one of 10 siblings, and she left all of them in the late 70s her earliest job was working at a Church's Chicken making fried chicken, and then became a housekeeper at Kaiser and worked her way up department. So for me, I'm like, to know that from her doing all of that, and then one generation to me where I get to work in the legislature in a leadership office, I'm kind of like, she did a lot so I could do what I get to do. So my culture always reminded me to be humble about how you got to where you are. But there are those cynic moments, like in my world, where I think, yes, we're doing all this great work to really empower Asian American and Pacific Islander communities. And when someone says, there's an incident of racism against Asian Americans, at their restaurant on 82nd, and someone asked me, "Am I shocked?" I'm like, "Are you asking me if I'm shocked that that happens? Because it's happened before. It's just it's being reported on a lot more, and we have the platforms to record it and share it than just 10 years ago." So there's that, like, these events in our community have happened for a long time. They're being presented so much more that you can't hide from it anymore. So that's where I balance the hopeful and the cynic of, it's happened, so what do we do about it now? Because you can't not know that it happens. There's just too many ways where information gets shared and where it's documented. So, but I definitely maintain that sense of hope, because I just think about where the legislature's come in just the last 4 years to now being the most diverse it's ever been, both electeds and staffers, just across the board, where I've had colleagues who, I think in 2012 when they started, they were the only staffer of color Latino in the building, to now 10 years later when it's so diverse. So when I take that just tenure look, there's a reason to be hopeful, because it happens.
That was a really good answer. Does anyone want to reply to what Jason just said?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I think there's a lot to be said about how activism tends to die out the older you get, and generally, as we get older, I think the desire for change in the attitude about how things aren't right or shouldn't be accepted as the status quo, I've observed generally disappears. And I know I'm talking very generally right now, and I know we currently on our panel have some older activists, and I appreciate that greatly. But I think the mentality with older immigrants or older people in general is just like, that's how it is, like that's how this country is. And I think there's a separate conversation that needs to be had about the unique experience of refugees and patriotism with this country, and the, I guess, tendency of refugees to constantly compare and be like, oh, well, it could be worse, or the tendency of refugees to just constantly be grateful to the country that I guess has fostered them, even though that country is technically responsible for their problems in the first place. But I just wanted to say that it's interesting to me that older generations, I think, oftentimes forget that you can be grateful for the people that I guess created the environment here for you, and at the same time comment on the failing nature of your state.
I would just say, like, Kian, if you would like to respond to that.
Oh, I don't know how to pronounce everything. Like, it's just Subangi. I think you had your hand raised.
Yeah.
So I will go after you.
Okay, I was just gonna make a really quick comment that, like, my parents aren't refugees. They came here just because of their job, but both of their parents, like, on both sides of my family, they were factory workers, right? So they came from like an extremely like middle class like family, and they come here, and anytime I like tell them about something that I feel like I struggle with, that identity wise, whether it be based on gender or just like my race, right? It's always like, so what, right? There's always this attitude of it could be so much worse. You're here, you have opportunities, take advantage. And while I agree to some extent that it makes sense, it's the attitude of like, there's so much more to fix. Why shouldn't we, right? Why shouldn't we just take that opportunity?
Mhm.
But and then another thing that angers me a lot, and this isn't like I don't have my own grandparents telling me, this is like mainly my parents, is how they tell me I'll get more conservative as I grow up, right? It's just like, oh, you're young, of course you're gonna believe this. It's like this naive optimism that they believe just comes out of me being naive, and I'm like, no. I mean, if I'm 25 and or if I'm like 30 and I believe what you believe, then I'll see that as me failing almost, because I believe in like basic human decency for everyone. How can that disappear with age? If it does, then that's not age, that's something else. But yeah.
And then Kian, did you want to respond?
Yeah, it just to add on to what like basically everyone have said. I immigrated to this country 7 years ago with my families, and I think that's something that we always was taught that okay, like you came to a new country, it's like your second home right now, so you always have to be grateful about this country. Like it should be enough. Like my parents, they only like completed like third grade in Vietnam, and now I got a chance to like finish like a bachelor degree and something like that. So they always taught me like you have to be grateful. But I think like, you know, like over the course of like 3, 4, or 5 years that I get involved in the community right now, I think like my approach to being grateful has changed. Like, you know, now if I'm grateful about this country, like I have to do everything I can to make it better for everyone. And as a person of color, I feel like now I'm at the table when I talk about stuff, people typically or like probably don't see me as a person. I think they would see me as a community, or like they would judge me as like, oh, an Asian man. So like I have to be extra careful about what I do or like what I say or like, you know, basically everything. So I think like I only work in the legislature for only like one session, but I think like one thing I learned so quickly is that we have to be mindful about like, or like we have to take note about like who being at the table, who is making the decision on something that not necessarily impacting them. And I have to be mindful about how I direct my energy and use my energy smartly. I mean, like the system is working perfectly fine as how it's designed. Like probably not meant to work for someone, like for a gay man, not meant to work for like an immigrant or like, you know, like a person of color, someone like English, not that person. Like, I think it's working perfectly fine how it was designed to. So, you know, when the system was built on like that long and it's take like forever, I mean, I keep reminding myself like it takes time to change it, but we cannot be not hopeful. I think like we have to continue to be hopeful. I'm hopeful. I think like, you know, I see a lot like younger people than me, like doing so many great things. We keep electing more like progressive person into the office. So I think like we have to keep pushing for that. Just don't forget to like find your own community, because I think like there will be a lot of time you got beaten up and you feel hopeless and you want to keep up. So I think it's just be important to find that community to support you.
Thank you a lot for that answer. That was a really good answer. I really appreciate that. And then Bing, you could respond or reply to the question, and then we'll move on to the next question.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that no, I'm 69 now. I retired. Fortunately, had the opportunity at age a little bit after 60 with a state and private pension, and I could have gone away and say, no, I'm done with politics, you know, all this other work, but I joined our retirees union chapter, and I think, you know, when someone mentioned about, you know, how they like to have the whole basket and not part of it, I was on bargaining teams when I was in the unions, and that's when I learned that, you know, it's a journey, it's not a destination. You build on your contract, you can't get everything, but you don't want to give up stuff that you earned in the past. And unfortunately, and a lot of people don't in the country don't have opportunity to be a member of a union because union membership is so low, and laws have been passed to make it very difficult for new unions to form. And unions is the place where an employee through the union has a voice in the workplace. And it's kind of like, if you have family, you're trying to tell your kids you don't have any say because you are the boss, and and everything I say goes. And the workplace, unless it's unionized, is very similar. The boss says this is the way it is. You follow orders and don't complain. And the other issue kind of have is concern is the cost of education and the debt people have to get an education unless their family has lots of money to be able to put them there, pay for the tuition. And that's an issue that I have concern with all the younger folks coming up behind us now.
Wait, so the concern is that we might, younger folk might sacrifice some of what the older folk were working for or working towards?
Well, people don't have a problem getting a 4-year degree, university degree nowadays because the tuition is so high and the loans are very expensive and the interests are real high because they're not government backed. I went to a private college, and when I graduated in '73, my loan was about $10,000 total, and I had 20 years to pay it off, and with 3% interest. So I took the whole time to pay it off because interest rates on loans were so high, and people now have trouble paying the interest on their loans after finding a job, and that's a big concern. How can you save up money to buy a house if you're still paying off your student loans?
Thank you a lot for that response, Bing. But a lot of what we were talking about in this question is related to, like, obviously how we feel for this country. And I guess the follow-up question would be, do you consider yourself patriotic, either to this country or your home country, or both? Just whatever answer you have, I guess. And I would like Christine and Alex to answer first, and then the floor is open to everyone.
Well, I do feel patriotic to this country because I grew up here. I actually was born in Trinidad and Tobago in the West Indies. Yes. And so grew up in New York City and spent most of my adult life here in Oregon. I have so much to say to all of you. Anita, yes, us older folks do tend to get tired, but I have to say, for me, I am an activist, and I have not met some of my goals that I have. So I will continue to break that glass or bamboo ceiling. For example, I am the first Chinese American to be on the National Organization for Women Board at a national level, and only the third API in the 55-year history. I am the first woman of color and API to be president of the Oregon chapter of NOW. And we just got selected or elected to be chair of the Portland Police Bureau API Advisory Council. This is the first time they're doing this because of the anti-Asian hate. So, and I brought Ken along with me. He's the only Gen Z, Gen Y, Ken. So we need the younger voices. But my two missions, and I'm sorry I'm getting off track because I have so much to say and I have to leave, but my two of my many goals is, one is to, because I'm obviously a feminist also, right? And is to make sure younger women and girls do not experience what I've experienced as a female in a man's patriarchic world with the misogyny. Okay, and my advice to you is, with this day and age, do not mold yourself to what anybody else have to say, unless, of course, you really are an awful human being. But, be comfortable in your skin, and accept who you are and speak up. I've been chastised for that growing up in my generation, but, and because I've always been in the man's world, career-wise and political and business-wise. But, it's like, as I got older, I said, I don't give a shit anymore. I'll be who I want to be. I'm done living the life of everybody else. But also, my mission is to help bring up the younger generation, because you guys are the future. Okay, forget about the old people. They have their time, and some of them just hold on to power. You're the future, and I'm going to help you be, give you the platform and be visible and be, reach your full potential. And so Kian is one of the people that I am bringing along. I'm, others too. But, so I'm hoping that, you speak up, you don't hold back, and you be comfortable with yourself speaking up, because that's what we need. That's the leadership we need from you. So I'll get off my soapbox, but I'd love to carry this conversation on with a longer period of time, because one of the things that I've been saying also is I've been hanging around younger folks, and I have to say you've reinvigorated me. You gave me that energy, and I love it. And I hope to do that more often. So please, maybe we can meet sometime, and I want to listen to you.
For sure, for sure.
I want to make sure your voice is elevated. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. I really appreciate you coming. You offered a lot of energy here, and much needed energy. Thank you a lot for that. And yeah, if there's any future events, we'll definitely invite you and try to get more in contact with you for sure. And I think Alex was supposed to respond next.
Yeah, the question was, do I feel patriotic, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I feel particularly patriotic, right? Like, my parents sort of always told me that I wouldn't be accepted as American growing up. And so I've never felt very American, right? But I'm sure if I were to go to literally any other country, they would identify me primarily as American, right? And so my sense of patriotism, like, I've never felt compelled to stand during the anthem, put my hand over my heart during the Pledge of Allegiance, right? Like, these are just sort of pro forma things that we do. So yeah, I don't think I've ever felt patriotic. I think I feel more pride in the people I consider in my community, right? So like my friends and my family and the people I'm around every day, I feel more a sense of pride in knowing them and being in good relation with them, rather than pride in any sort of state, local, federal, nation state government.
And does that extend for like also back home as well? Like, you don't feel prideful of your parents' culture, ethnicity either?
I feel prideful of my parents' culture and ethnicity, and I think it's slightly complicated for some Vietnamese Americans, right? So my parents were refugees, right? So the phrase, we are here because you were there, strongly applies, right? So we would, like, a lot of Vietnamese Americans, I don't think would be in the US right now were it not for the war.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but even though the pride in Vietnamese language and culture is fraught, right? Because it's not necessarily the same particular language and culture that's being practiced in Vietnam right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because of the political ideologies that the U.S. aligned itself with during the war, and those are the people that ended up coming to America in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, right? And so now you get a different mix of folks, but yeah, I think I feel pride in my identity, but I think it's very specific in who I am.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. And would anyone like to respond? Yeah, go ahead, Anada.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, because Alex and I are family, I feel incredibly similar. But I think growing up, like, especially in my neighborhood, I always realized, like, you're not Vietnamese enough to be Vietnamese, you're not American enough to be American. And so it's this weird halfway because it's like if I whitewash myself and I don't bring my food to school because the kids say it smells bad, like, oh, you're a banana, right? Like, that's all that. And then if I dress in, Vietnamese clothes, or if I like eat my food at school, it's like, oh, well, you're not supposed to do that here. Um, and I guess like to answer the question directly about whether or not I'm patriotic. I think Asians, although not lately with the spike in Asian American hate crimes, like we receive a lot of privilege from the system. So the older I get and the more I educate myself, I think I've realized that I can't like this country because this country was not built for people of color at all. The history of it, as I was growing up, like when I was young, I thought that like this country was built for minorities by minorities, and it's more now that I realize that history is whitewashed and the system was never created equal to begin with. So I don't think that I can be proud of a country that doesn't serve everyone.
Mm, yeah. That's kind of disheartening, but so true. Yeah. Yeah, Christine. Bye, Christine. Yeah, does anyone, yeah, go ahead, B.
And I mute myself. Yeah, in a way, when I look back the previous 4 years with our despicable president that we had somehow got elected, uh, I feel like my speech was protected because of the United States and the respect for it. Because there's been plenty of posts on Facebook where it's said bad things about the president, and no one has come and knocked on my door and put me in handcuffs and take me away. And that happens a lot in other countries, and so we still have that opportunity here. But unless we stay vigilant, uh, we may lose that opportunity. Uh, I just hope that all those people that was involved in January 6th are punished uh, and get the justice that they deserve, and because they're not patriotic, in my opinion, and we who come in this country and appreciate it uh, and work hard, uh, we don't feel like we're entitled or privileged because we have to earn it.
Hmm. Like you have to earn what exactly?
Earn our right to be here.
Okay.
When
And
people
how
say
would
go
you see?
home, go back to where you come from. Um, it's it's unless you know some history, they don't belong here either if they use the same principle, because Native Americans are the ones
Yeah.
who were here, and the whole um, concept of Europeans coming here and says, well, you don't have a deed to your land, therefore we can take it away. And
Yeah, no, that's true. So like overall, would you say that you still feel patriotic?
I I I do, because I have a comfortable uh, living here. I own my own home, um, and and have a good retirement, and and can travel, pretty much freely without having to be worried about being arrested. But on the other hand, uh, it was something that a friend of mine whose wife adopted a Japanese Mexican uh, baby when I was working many years ago, said there's certain neighborhoods you don't go to during certain times of the day. And so, that is kind of disconcerting because, everywhere is not safe depending on who you may be.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess it's just kind of like it's kind of like a conflict because there's a lot of pros, but then there's also a lot of cons.
Right. And you have to be, it's kind of like they're starting to teach Asians uh, how to learn situational awareness. Look at your surroundings, and so that's something that we didn't have to worry about for a long time, but now you pretty much have to.
Thank you for that a lot, Bing. And would anyone like to respond? If not, we could always move on to the next question. But yeah, respond to it. Anada was saying, Alex, Bing, anybody.
I have like a couple more things to add. I think when it comes to patriotism, I'm more appreciative of what we have in America rather than like absolute pride, right? Because I feel like the connotation of patriotism is just so heavy, right? It's just so extreme. And I think especially for people like for children who like live this like dual identity their entire lives, it's confusing to me of what identity I'm more proud of or appreciative of, right? Because it's the same thing for, I guarantee, almost every single brown kid out there. Like, I'm not Indian enough to be Indian, I'm not white enough to be white. And I see that conflict in all of my friends and the people I know daily about like trying to figure out how the hell do I fit into these two categories that both don't want me, right? So that is just something that like that struggle is, I don't know how easily it'll go away. I don't know if it will ever go away because that is the identity, right? It's not either or, it's both. But like I'm appreciative of the things that America has given me, but I'm also like I think I take more pride in my cultural identity. But then if you look at the rights that most Indians have, it's a little less than what's given to us here, right? So it's also like I have the privilege to pick and choose, but the simple fact that I have to pick and choose just eliminates any opportunity of me being patriotic for either side.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. So moving on to the next question. This is actually from one of the audience members. How do we increase voter turnout among younger AAPI voters? Floor is open to anybody to answer.
I think one thing, because wait, I'll make this really quick so Bing can answer. But I work on a couple of campaigns, and the main thing that wins elections is obviously voter turnout, and you want to make sure to turn out the people that vote for you, right? So I think to generate more voter turnout for younger, like Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, is just getting them more candidates that look like them and believe in what they believe and have similar experiences as them, right? I think we're all very tired of voting in older white men to office because that's the only goddamn option we have, right? Biden being a clear example. We had so many options, so many available things, and we just have to focus on making sure that the drive to vote is on all ends, not just federal, because that's the downfall of the American system, right? The entire government only functions when everybody's voting for every election that's happening. That's how you stay fully involved. That's how you maintain a democratic process.
Yes.
So I think we need to work on making sure to promote that, like, we're not going to see the presidents we want unless we start electing the people we want at lower levels of government, because they start building from there. You're not going to see a random 35-year-old out of nowhere, no government experience, run for president. You're going to need to build that sort of stuff, and only the people can do that. So I think we need to really start advertising that, like, this is a whole process, and not only are the politicians in this process, we're the ones that push the politicians through, right? So
yes. No, thank you for that a lot. That was really You keep spitting facts. You keep spitting facts. Bing, yeah.
Yeah, the person asked the question, hi Betsy, was also involved with Mona County Democrats, and she at one time was my assistant district leader for my district, and then she stepped up to be district leader. And how to get more API to vote? It's the example that Stacey Abrams did in Georgia that got the black turnout. It was hard work, person to person, door to door, like one-to-one conversation. That's how we win, win elections. And when I volunteer, I'm in Inner Portland where Democrats win the primary, and that's it. I mean, the Republicans don't have a chance. At one time they did. So I adopt a district. I go out to East County and walk and campaign and canvass for candidates out there because we call them swing districts. A few thousand votes, sometimes a few hundred, can make a difference. And in one city council race in Gresham was like a recount of 7 votes made a difference. So every vote really does count, and it's important, and getting your supporters out there is important. So it requires a lot of footwork, unfortunately, and if you can get more people involved, the better.
And like in your experience, the canvassing when you would go into those swing districts worked really well?
It's, well, there was one story that I had that I was out at night, it was in the fall, and I was in a, what I call upper scale neighborhood because the homes are really look like expensive. And there's this lady that was on my walk list because it has a name and the age of the person. And this person was in her 70s. And it was one of my last doors I have to knock on. And I said, oh, she probably won't even answer the door because it's dark. And I knocked on the door. First thing, surprised, she opened the door. And I told her I was a volunteer working on this candidate, and to my surprise, her eyes lit up, and I said, I love the guy. And so she related this story that he had knocked on her door, talked to her. She had this big Social Security problem that the government wanted a bunch of money back, from her, and she didn't know what to do. And the candidate gave her the contact information to one of our U.S. senators, and they resolved her problem. So she was, a fan of that candidate, and I said, well, I told her, tell your neighbors. And so things happen that surprise you that you never expect, when you're going out door to door.
No, that's actually that's a really nice story. That's a good story. I think it also just emphasizes the fact that's like, especially with voter turnouts, like if you want people to turn out, make sure you're doing something for them to turn out in the first place, right? Like you can't say you're representing them and then not hearing their concerns, right? You have to address their concerns for them to.
You have to listen.
You got to listen, exactly, yeah. Kian, yeah.
Yes, I just want to like add on real quick to what like the 2 people prior to me just said. I think like the first one being said, I mean, I absolutely agree. I think like the relationship building is definitely the key. And I know that like one thing we can continue to push for is that more funding and more support for like grassroots organization, because I think that they're doing like a lot of great work, but a lot of time they like undermine it. And how hard it is for nonprofit to raise fund or like raise money generally, but I think they continue to do that. So I think like if we can donate to them, or like we can ask the county, the state people to like fund them, I think it should be great. And for young people, like specifically, I know that like TikTok or like we have to like do something that like approach them more. We have to like use those platforms more. I think like to connect to them. And one thing that I have to plug in because I'm so proud of, because recently our office just fund $340,000 for East Portland for a project called English anyway, participatory budgeting. So basically what it's doing is that it's gonna give that money to develop a process so that like all the youth from 12 years old up to 24, 25 years old can come and present and tell us how they want to spend that money. So like actually give them the power and they can decide. So I think that will help for the long run, that they know the importance of their voice, and then hopefully it will help them participate more in this like civic engagement and stuff. And I also want to touch base to what Subangi. Like, do you mind remind me how you pronounce your name? I'm sorry.
Very good, Shubhangi.
Yeah, Subangi.
Yes.
Yeah. So what she said is that, you know, like we also have to pay attention to like the local race and stuff too. But also at the same time, we have to acknowledge like the system. Again, I keep talking about a system, but that now when you like looking at like how expensive is it to run for like a campaign or like to run for like an election. So it's really expensive. So, you know, like people pour money in the influence like with candidate. So currently we have like a campaign finance reform. So I think like we have to put for that, for the real change, so that like more people from the working class can run for like office. School board, like they are still non-pay, but like they have a lot of influence. They make a lot of decisions that like impact the student. They still non-pay. Or like, you know, legislature, they also not pay very well. So they, you know, when we think about those things, it end up people older, wealthy, white guy can afford doing so, because like, it's really like a hard burden to asking people from working class, people of color to run for office when we know that the current system doesn't support them. So I think like it's a both end situation. We acknowledge that, but we have to like get into the system anyway. We have to continue to support like the candidate to run if we want real change, because at the end of the day, those are the ones that making ultimate decision on policy that's impact everyone. So I just want to point that out.
Thank you for that answer, Alal, and thank you for giving us that perspective, Kian. And then also moving on to the next question, I guess. How has the media's representation of Asians hurt Asians as a community, and has it helped at all? If Jason would like to answer first, and then floor is open for everyone.
Yeah, I think my problem, in all honesty, with the media is that they just report on what happened, one or couple stories, and that's it. They move on to something else. They don't do any in-depth of like what the long-term community impact is, really talk to communities about or highlight ways that communities are responding, especially around the Asian American hate that's happened in the last several months. That's been my biggest frustration around the media, is they don't give it the attention that it deserves and do the thoroughness in the reporting. Or when they are talking about kind of here's the issue, when they talk about here's the policy ways in which to resolve it, they have the same people responding on all those news panels all the time. It's the same people at the local level, at the national level, and I'm like, I've seen people on multiple talk shows every day. It's the same people saying the same talking points. So that's the part that annoys me the most about the media. So I think if we're really going to shift the narrative, I think it's really about saying, you know, media, thank you so much for covering a piece of it, but those people that you're highlighting are not the only people that are wanting to weigh in on the issue. So they need to do a better job about expanding who their contacts are that they engage, or their analysts, so to speak. Because that's been a long-standing, I think for me, that has been the central frustration I've had, is that there are a lot of sides to a story, and media always has a history of condensing it to this side versus this side, and that's it, without really giving it the thoroughness of reporting to help the community understand.
Yeah, so I kind of thought about media from a different standpoint, I guess. just because I was thinking about just the microaggressions that Asians have had to watch and experience in theaters and on stages, like Kung Fu, or from a theater standpoint, Miss Saigon, like the romanticization of Vietnam and the exoticism of Asian women, specifically on two separate spectrums, like this overly seductive Asian lusty woman or this like white pure lotus flower. And specifically in that show, Miss Saigon, it really emphasizes how Asian women aren't valued without white men pursuing them. And that really damaged me when I was a kid because I first experienced that show when I was in middle school. So it was really damaging because it's hard to see this this woman lose everything in her, like all the life being drained out of somebody as soon as this white man deems her unworthy of love or unworthy or just neglects her in general. And I think it's harmful because I think that show really exposes how the United States only sees wars as victories or losses. Specifically, Vietnam, they only really see it as the war that they lost, not the lives that were ruined or damaged or changed. So I think like Hollywood specifically still is doing a really bad job with the microaggressions against Asians. Like everybody went batshit crazy for Crazy Rich Asians, and still it's like even within that movie, it's great that there's so much there are so many Asian actors being uplifted from that, but like it feeds into this notion that Asia is this like far distant land with like riches and goods to be exploited.
Yeah, that was actually, thank you for the answer. I like how Jason gave us from a news perspective and you gave us from like a more Hollywood film perspective. Um, does anyone else have anything they'd like to add? Yeah, go ahead.
I have a character that I really don't like in the media. And anyone, if anyone can resonate with me, like, go with me here. I really don't like Ravi from Jessie. Let's think about this really hard for a second. That boy owned a lizard
Wait,
and
so
wore
one
kurtas
second.
everywhere.
1 second, Shivangi. Just wanted to give context for everyone. Ravi is from a Disney show called Jessie, and is about this nanny who goes into this rich family who adopts kids from different ethnicity, and is just like showcasing how this live-in nanny deals with raising the kids. And one of the kids is Ravi, and he comes from India. He's the stereotypical textbook Indian. Yes, so
Oh
sorry.
my god, not Baljeet.
Oh, Baljeet. That's funny.
Oh god. It's just for Indian, first of all, Indian women. I don't know if I can list any characters. Netflix had that one little series. Like Netflix had a specific series on an Indian girl who was literally specifically my age, like exactly my age. And it was disastrous because just from a TV standpoint, it wasn't that good. From a plot standpoint, it really wasn't that good. And from a cultural standpoint, it she as an Indian, what really angered me is that she as an Indian, the only way that they were able to portray her in a positive light was by making sure that she rejected everything Indian about her, right? The opening scene is her literally disrespecting her own religion, right? By throwing books that were blessed by God out of the window, right? And there's specific scenes where she doesn't like being at specific pujas or religious um, occasions. And while I understand that characters can have that distaste for organized religion, for a first like that, it really shouldn't have been the only way we can portray a positive representation of an Indian young girl is by making sure that she doesn't like anything about herself being Indian, right? That's the only way we can have positive representation is by rejecting everything brown about us other than our skin. And that was what pissed me off the most because I'm like, okay, maybe like 11-year-old me really didn't like going to pujas, but that's community, right? That's her openly rejecting Indian community and just saying, yeah, I'd rather be white than Indian, even though it wasn't like explicitly said like that, it was implicit. And then when it comes to characters like Ravi, it's like, I don't know a single Indian person like that, even in India, right? And I'm talking about like no American influence. Like if I go to India, I probably wouldn't be able to find anyone like Ravi. So it's just, I think especially for Indians, it's just this like this slap in the face for with this stereotype, right? And I know kids right now can't escape it. And I have the privilege of being with a lot of Indian kids in my school, and even within that, we sometimes even stereotype ourselves, and we see stereotypes to be forced on us. But if I was alone in a majority white school, I don't know what I would have. I don't know if I would have still had the identity that I have right now. But it's sort of like the only way that this person of color can ever be respected and find joy is by rejecting any color in them. That's what I see when I look at Asian American representation in media.
Yeah, no, thank you for that a lot. I actually, because Loki, I did like Never Have I Ever, but you gave me a different perspective on it, to be honest. And now I'm like questioning it. Might go back and rewatch it after this meeting, to be honest, to look at it from there. But yeah, no, thank you a lot for the answer. Appreciated it. And I just wanted to move on to the next question, just because we're a little bit short on time. Were you surprised by the recent violence against Asians? And this is for anyone to answer. And if you're not surprised, could you give context as to why you're not surprised? And if you are surprised, can you give context as to why you're surprised? Thank you.
I mean, this goes back to how history is whitewashed, right? Like, I didn't even know this, but as soon as these crimes were happening, and you do like literally just minimal research, you find out that every time there's a pandemic or every time there's some mysterious disease, it's always like either Asians or any people of color really being scapegoated for these things. Like when the bubonic plague was happening in San Francisco, Chinatown was demolished, like literally, like destroyed. And so no, this goes back to what Jason was saying about how the media only reports when it's like when it becomes a phenomenon instead of like isolated incidents, and how also media thrives off of negative energy and these incidents like that. And it's just, I don't think any Asian would really be surprised. I think it's more of like sadness or like more anger than normal, because I think we all kind of grew up knowing that this country isn't really ours, but then when you kind of see it being reported on, or when you see it um, to the extent I guess it's happening, it just becomes overwhelming.
If I could add to that, I would say, am I surprised? Nope. Clear and simple. I again, I'm only 37, but I'm now in the point where when these attacks are racially motivated, my brain goes into, okay, the first 5 things I need to do are like call my friends, see if they're okay, what can I do to help the community that's been immediately impacted, how do I make sure what I'm sharing doesn't unintentionally doesn't traumatize anyone that's going to be paying attention. Like it's gotten so repetitious where I'm like, okay, what are my default responses? Like I've gotten to that point, which is awful, but I'm like, it is so commonplace, in part because we learn things so much faster now than 10 years ago. It's like, oh, another incident. Okay. And so in some parts, it feels like it's becoming so formulaic of incident. Here's how the press is going to cover it. Here's how someone's going to misinterpret it, act based on the misinterpretation, fix the problem that should never been a problem in the first place because someone didn't report it correctly. It's just so like robotic almost that it's disappointing, infuriating, and not surprising, to be completely candid. I think what I want to be hopeful for is, like, I just look at the past year of everything that has gone on, and I think, okay, everything has gone on that has happened, but now, Congress passed, a law that President Biden signed around, hate directly targeted at Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. Like, okay, sign a law. Are you going to put the money forward to enforce it? How will you ensure all 50 states comply with it? So, like, I wouldn't have known to ask that question 20 years ago, but now I do. So now I'm like, okay, as Oregon, how do we ensure we are in compliance with federal law? Because everyone is talking about the importance of, Asian American Pacific Islander hate. So it's, okay, thank you for your press release. How will you comply with the law now? So that's kind of my new behavior change that I wouldn't have done 10, 15 years ago. But it's now my new default question is, thank you for the support. Help me do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess like another hopeful thing is like now that you changed that and that wasn't your response 10 years ago, hopefully other people have the same type of response and are looking for productive solutions as well. I mean, it sucks that we have to be pushed so far to want to make productive change, but at least it's happening and we should be grateful for the people at the front lines making those changes. And yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, prior to our previous president, hate crimes and aggression was more under the radar than after he took office. And it actually started when he was campaigning before he was elected, pointing out that all these Asian women who were pregnant came to the US to have their babies so they're going to have naturalized citizenship. That was the first salvo that he threw out against Asians, in his campaign. And then after he got elected, more and more came out. Then when he lost his election, it was like people come out and go after all these people, Black, Asians, people of color. They caused me to lose my election, and 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 a lot of these people are mentally ill, and that's all it took to get them to flip and come out and cause aggression. And it's unfortunate, but it just shows you how insidious this phenomenon is in this country. I remember when George Bush Jr. said that we don't have racism in this country anymore.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, he actually said that when he was president.
That's ridiculous. But yeah, no, I do agree with what you're saying in the sense that racism was probably much more under the radar before Trump, but Trump didn't create more racism. He just exposed what a lot of people were thinking and gave voice to racist people, basically. But yeah, so I guess like what I'm hearing a lot is like people aren't surprised, which is really sad. But again, let's trying to be hopeful that people will make the change necessary. We will be ending the roundtable now, but just want closing statements from everyone. And I guess the younger folk, if you could just say your experience in this roundtable, and if the older folk could give advice towards other Asians that are growing up and trying to find their identity. And if everyone in the audience could quickly also follow the Facebook group, the Facebook Zoomer to Boomers group, where we post questions weekly and we post new events as well. And we would just love more participants to make the group more active. But yeah, so if the younger folk, I'll call on everyone, and if the younger folk could just say their experience of the roundtable or something new that they learned, and if the older folk could give advice towards younger Asians that are trying to find their identity. I could go first. I could say what I learned, and this one was it was just very informative, to be honest. I think one of my favorite questions was the voter turnout question, and it was just interesting to see how like there's just so many aspects into just saying let's raise. It's not just it's not just saying let's raise voter turnout. It's about saying like this is the problem with voter turnout, tackle this specifically, and saying such general broad empty statements. Go into the communities, listen to what they're saying, vote for local representatives so that they could have a power to go higher and stuff like that. So like it was very eye-opening in general. Also, just realizing there's a lot of nuances with AAPI, hate and AAPI, crimes against AAPI. And it was just thank you for everyone who's giving me your new perspectives. And if Anada could go next.
Yeah, I guess I'm just grateful for this roundtable because I think oftentimes having conversations with older Asians often becomes very defensive and argumentative instead of, constructive. And I think it's important to have these conversations in a safe space where ideas are being exchanged instead of, just yelling at your parents. So I'm just grateful for everybody for being here.
And if Alex could go next.
Yeah, I think thank you guys for organizing this. I think what I took away is how important it is to just get other people's perspectives. I think we are so much in our own little bubbles a lot of the time that we forget to, use opportunities to reach out to other people to see how they're feeling and how they're reacting to things. And I think it's important to not only just to listen to opposing views, but also to views that might be slightly different in your own, to maybe grow in your own point of view or to strengthen how you feel. And so, yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you for that. If Kian could go next.
Yes, so first of all, thanks so much everyone for having this space. My closing statement is that, I have two things I want to mention. The first one is that I think like within the AAPI community, one thing that oftenly not addressed very well is that the disparity between the top tier and then, because I know that like generally the AAPI have like a really high income, but when you look into like the Burmese community, I think like the annual one is just like 30K per year. And a lot of people are not aware, like not even want to talk about it. And we have to include Pacific Islander and Native Hawaiian into our advocacy as well. And doesn't matter if all of us have our own intersectionality, and we can be from a marginalized community, but we also can be from the oppressed community as well. So I think like just be mindful that at the end of the day, we are living in a white supremacy institutional that we're going to be benefit from it somehow. So I think like take that note and move forward as we continue our own advocacy. And I'm very grateful for everyone who being here and share your experience. So thank you.
Thank you for that. And that was actually a very disheartening fact to hear, but thank you for raising awareness about that. And if Shabangi could go next.
Yeah, so thank you all of you all for having this discussion. This is incredibly helpful. I think for me, on like the activism side, I've been so like caught up in like organizing with youth that I haven't had much opportunities to interact with older activists, right? And along with that, I've never really spoken to a person who's been a member of unions and worked on that side of like the political realm of everything. So I think this has provided me with a lot of new perspectives and a lot of new things to think about. And also I really appreciate like a space where I can come and like bounce off my own perspectives, right? So yeah, thank you.
Thank you for coming. And Nadia, if you do have any closing statements?
Yeah, honestly, thank you guys so much for being here, for sharing all of these amazing, opinions, and I appreciate all of them. I'm also really, really grateful for this unity, that we're able to kind of like create just by having literally one discussion. I already feel much more connected to you guys and just like to the world, I guess. Like this pandemic is something else. But yes, I feel like we just need to continue working hard, to make change. And I guess just starting to work together much more often. And then we'll definitely see some change happening soon. But yes, let's stay hopeful.
And then Bing, if you could give a closing statement as well as advice to younger Asian folk.
Yeah, I think, well, thanks for inviting me for this panel discussion. I've kind of been, trying to get involved in various groups for a long time. And the message I like to, convey is that you change people's minds one person at a time. And so, you know, I try to attend as many coffees and town halls of my own elected representative and senator, but other, you know, ones, you know, further away that I had volunteered for the campaign, and I get invites to their, well, now Zoom town halls, and sometimes there's less than a dozen people there. So if you want to have influence on, you know, concerns, issues you may have at the state legislature, you know, some of these small gatherings is the place to go to. And I've never had, well, they're all Democrats, but I've always been respected. And I think they're also very respectful. And now that, you know, I was very surprised that Con Pham, who's our state representative in my District 46, she had like 5 candidates in her primary election. She won by over 80% of the votes. That has never happened in all the time I've been participating in politics where there's been a contested primary. And so this says a lot how she had organized and got together all these groups to back her up and campaign for her. And this was, you know, wasn't easy, and was very surprising. So it's, you never know. It's participation and changing people's minds one at a time. That's what, you know, change people's perspective of who you are. Sometimes you might be the only AAPI person you know, some white person has ever met, and or some Asian person that didn't know how to get involved, and they're lost, and all it takes is maybe an invite.
Amar, you're still on mute.
Embarrassing. Okay, so thank you for that. I think I really appreciated that. Jason?
Yeah, I want to say thank you to everyone that has participated, and I've really appreciated listening to our younger generations. I think first and foremost, they are more articulate than some of the folks that I have to, you know, engage with on a daily basis. Number one. Number two is you all say what you actually think, which is an incredible breath of fresh air. You don't hold back. So knowing that, my advice to you all is, one, don't lose that. Two, if you're ever in a meeting and someone says this can't be done, your default question has to be, why can't it be? Don't just assume that, but that is the actual statement. Three is, if you're going into a room or any entity or a meeting and there is no other person of color like you, just remember that you might be the first, and your job is to ensure that there is a second and a third and a fourth and more that come after you. And I think for me, most importantly, is I have loved learning with you, and I hope that many of us, all of us, get the chance to work alongside you in some official capacity. So I'm hoping that you are lobbying the legislature, and I see you all in the building fighting for issues that you care about. So I would hope that when you're involved in campaigns, do not get involved in just the get out the vote element. Be in the campaigns, either if you are shaping policy or actually running the campaign. Don't just look at the one part of the organization. Find the area that you want to be the most impactful with and go for it. So that's my advice.